Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today, and a big thank you to the OECD and Delphi as well for arranging what I'm hoping will be a fantastic conference. This actually is the inaugural meeting of the CEPR Research Policy Network on the economics of longevity and aging. And I'm really pleased to have the word longevity and aging in the title rather than just aging. I came into this topic in the sort of second half of my career, and the first half was spent very much looking at monetary and fiscal policy. And those of you with that background will recognize that whenever you hear the word aging society, no good is going to come from it. It's always just a negative story. No one fist bumps and says, yay, we've got an aging society, which is a bit strange, really, isn't it? Because it's kind of one of the greatest achievements of the 20th century. It's fewer infants passing, it's fewer parents snatched away in midlife, it's more older people meeting their grandchildren or even great-grandchildren, and we go, oh, we got an aging society. So it's not that there aren't problems with an aging society, but I think there's also opportunities. And I'm delighted to see recently, with the work of the OECD and the IMF, some of those opportunities coming to the fore. And it's those balance of opportunities and challenges that I want the Research Policy Network to focus on. When we talk about AI, when we talk about climate change, we talk about quite radical adaptation and adjustment. When it comes to an aging society, we don't really move much beyond changing the state pension age, which I'm not sure is enough to tackle the challenges that we're looking at today. So that's what I want the RPN to focus on. And if you don't mind, I'm going to spend my time that I've got just sort of outlining how I see these two forces of an aging society and a longevity society. There we go. So this is a chart you'll all be very, very familiar with. It's the chart that I always used when I was teaching my business school students about an aging society. It's the United Nations projections of population, and you can see there's 1950 and it goes out to 2100. These aren't quite the latest numbers. And two things everyone always focuses on. The first is this huge increase in the world's population. Although given fertility trends, it's not obvious that that's going to maintain itself. The second thing everyone does is they draw a line across at a relatively arbitrary number. I've just turned 60, so let's choose 60 as the number, and everyone over 60 is old. And then you get the old age dependency ratio. And when you look at this chart, you can see around the world, there's a huge increase in the number and proportion of older people. And that's always bad news as a macroeconomic starting point, because in general, the assumption is old people get ill, so there's health costs, and old people don't work, so there's a pensions crisis. And those two together are going to act as a burden on society. We turn one of the greatest achievements of the 20th century into a big problem for the 21st century. And I'm always struck by Thomas Malthus when I talk about the aging society. Thomas Malthus, you may well remember, was an economist, demographer at the end of the 18th century. And, you know, a lot of economists in the room. Economists are known as a dismal science, and Malthus was particularly dismal. He just said, population grows exponentially, our ability to create resources grows linearly. So we will run out of resources, and so we will get famines, we'll get wars, we'll get disease, because we just cannot maintain the population given it grows exponentially and resources grow linearly. And like any good macroeconomic forecaster, he didn't give a number or a date as to when his forecast would happen. But when he was writing, the world population was about 1 billion. I think last year it reached 8 billion. So in some sense, Malthus was wrong. We supported a much bigger population than Malthus thought was possible. And the reason was we sort of had the Industrial Revolution. I'm not saying the Industrial Revolution was only good news, but it brought about an increase in productivity that meant we could support a bigger population. And the increase in productivity was so great, it also enabled us to invest more in our health and education, which made people even more productive. So if you think about where Malthus' projection was premature, that there was a limit to the world's population, it was because he didn't factor in the ingenuity, the investment, the institutions, and the innovation that came with the Industrial Revolution. And the reason I'm talking about Malthus is the aging society story is sort of similar to Malthus. It doesn't say we've got too many people, we can't support them. It says we're living too long. We're living for too many years, and so we can't create the resources to support the longer life that we now have. And it's kind of obvious as an economist, if we don't invest in our human capital over 80, 90, 100 years, then guess what? We find our health starts to fail. We find that we're not productive for long enough, and we get the health and the pensions crisis that we fear. But if we could innovate, if we could invest, if we could show ingenuity and come up with new institutions, then perhaps we can make sure we're healthy for longer, engaged and productive for longer. And that's how I see the longevity agenda. It's not about there being more old people. It's about the probability of living a longer life. So let's go back to this chart here. The thing that's really changed is the probability of the young becoming the old. That's the really fundamental change. And as an economist, you know, when you've got a 80% chance when you're 20 of making it to 80, compared to a 20% chance of making it from 20 to 80, you're going to behave very differently. We all prepare for future events depending upon how likely they are. For most of human history, it's a minority of the young who have become the very old. Now it is the majority who can expect to become very old. And so we need to invest more in that human capital. And economics will tell you all sorts of ways in which, if you live for longer, you change your behavior. Started off with consumption. It's a very simple life cycle model. You make people live for longer, wealth accumulates more, you become richer, you have more to spend. David Canning with David Bloom and Michael Moore has a paper that says, if you live for longer, you know you're going to have to work for longer. But you're also going to have to invest in your health. So there's lots of ways in a simple life cycle model that if you live for longer, you change how you behave. A very simple idea here is that I'm 60, and I have to behave differently from my father and my grandfather at 60, because if I look at the actuarial tables, I've got more time ahead of me. So this is just an economic phenomenon that I think goes relatively under-examined. Most of macro looks at a change in the age structure of the population. There's more old people, there's fewer young people. And that has implications for wages and interest rates. I just don't find it the most interesting economic issue. The most interesting economic issue is we're all being given more time. What do we do with that time? How do we adapt and adjust and seize the opportunities? Just again to sort of show you this sort of two-edged way of looking at things, this is showing you the average age of a UK citizen and also how many years they can expect still to live. So there's a backward measure of age, chronological age, and there's a forward-looking measure of age, what's often called prospective age. And the average Brit has never been so old, but never had so long left to live. And I'm not sure if we can just call that an aging society. I've got more time than past generations. Another favorite of mine is to show the UK old age dependency ratio over the last 100 years. It's tripled, as has it in the United States. Over the next 50 years, it's going to rise by 50%, having tripled the last 100 years. And we sort of take for granted this will cause problems. But that famous phrase, demography isn't destiny, is pretty obvious when you look at the historical track record. A tripling is rarely pointed to as a cause of why the UK economy has slowed down over the last 100 years, but it's often the first place people begin to say the future is going to be challenging. The old age dependency ratio is a horrible phrase. It's also not a very reliable empirical measure for economic performance. This is just some charts from the OECD that pick up the same point. The irony of talking about a longer life is I always run out of time, so I'm going to slightly accelerate things and just sort of say I think the aging society is about a change in the age structure of the population. It's often very negative. It also persuades people that it's not a problem till people become old. The key thing about a longer life is about changing how we age and making aging more malleable. And you can change how you age when someone gets to 80. It's a lot easier to do it when they're 60, and it's a lot easier to do it when they're 30. So given every country around the world is going through this aging phenomena, it's not just Japan or Korea, where they're very advanced in terms of the number of people aged over 65, that this is an issue. This is something where we need to adapt early to do the radical adjustment and adaptation that is needed. And what we really have to focus on is we already have a long life. But how do we make it healthy for longer? Something I'll focus on this afternoon. Because the biggest health challenge we now face when global life expectancy is now 73 is how we age. The biggest lifetime health burden is now going to be around aging-related diseases. And though we're living for longer, not all the years of extra life we've got are healthy. We need to really target compressing morbidity. And if we are living for longer, we need more resources over our lifetime. It may be that AI will produce those for us, but how do we make sure that we are productive, but above all, engaged for longer? How do we make it a good, long life? We've done brilliantly making it a long life, and that's why we fear a pensions and a health crisis. But how do we redesign our institutions? How do we redesign our policies to invest in human capital over a longer time span to achieve that three-dimensional longevity dividend? I'm obviously obsessed with this topic. I think there are a few topics as important for policy than this one. It's something that is relevant not just this year, but in all the years to come. And if we think about our own individual and social futures, how we achieve this seems to be an enormous welfare issue and opportunity. So I'm really looking forward to the conference and hearing people's ideas and views on this, how we deal with the challenges as well as seize the opportunities. And I'm very much looking forward to the Research Policy Network bringing academics and policymakers together on this topic. Thank you.